This segment on supply and demand, we're going to look at healthcare in the USA. We've learned from from fee.org that healthcare inflation is 3 times, however you're measuring inflation, using what index by whom, with what data and for what reason. Healthcare inflation is 3 times inflation in the rest of the economy in the USA. And the reason for that is the Affordable Care Act of 2010, which subsidizes health insurance. So the Affordable Care Act of 2010 was written by the insurance companies to give the insurance companies above normal profits. The Democrats have wanted universal health care ever since at least the 1930s. So we're finally able to take advantage of the financial crisis to pass the Affordable Care Act of 2010, which requires everybody to have health insurance, not health care, but health insurance. So let's start. Pre-intervention, we start with perfect competition, perfect factor mobility. Everybody who wants healthcare in the United States is able to get it. Everybody who wants to provide healthcare in the United States is able to do so. We start with the emerged price and quantity are optimal. So we ask ourselves, why would there be intervention into the healthcare market? I've already said that the Democrats have wanted universal healthcare for generations. So let's watch what happens. And this is similar to the market for the education, for the market for higher education in the USA, where you're subsidizing demand, shifting out demand and increasing the price. So here's the Affordable Care Act requiring everybody to have health insurance. Demand shifts out. More people are utilizing healthcare services than would be had there not been the intervention. More people are buying health insurance than they would have absent the intervention. And there's your healthcare inflation. Another drawback of universal healthcare or socialized medicine is the moral hazard. When the state's providing for you, then you don't have incentive to take care of yourself, right? It's called moral hazard. And so who benefits from this situation? Oh, one thing I should mention, and this is very important, is that under the market process, supply would shift out. If demand would go up, supply would shift out. But we don't have free entry and exit in the healthcare industry because it's captured. So there's not free entry and exit. So supply is unable to shift out. Same thing with the higher education market. Supply is unable to shift out because of the accreditation process for higher education. So healthcare is like any other normal economic good. It's except for communicable diseases, of course. That's perhaps a public good role for the state. I'm not sure. So healthcare for an individual is like any other scarce public good, and so you're distorting the market by prioritizing the market for healthcare. And Richard Wagner at George Mason University has written this book to promote the general welfare, market processes versus political transfers. So the way the healthcare market is now it's a political transfer. Who benefits? Well, the insurance companies benefit, obviously. Politicians in the state and the technocrats and the bureaucrats benefit because they're planning all of this state-provided health care, right? So they benefit. And large firms benefit because if you're a firm with 50 or more, I believe it's 50 or more employees, you then have to provide your employees health care. And this is the big thing, is that you can write off that health care on the tax code. So those firms or individuals like myself, I can't write off my health insurance on the tax code. Large firms can. And who else benefits is the American Medical Association, because more people are visiting doctors than they would be absent the intervention. And then who loses? Everyone loses because of the healthcare inflation, and future generations lose as the state creates more debt. And we know from, and passes that debt on to future generations. And we know from the GAO that action is needed to address the nation's fiscal health as we pass debt to as the government gets more and more involved in providing public goods. We create more and more debt and pass that debt on to future generations. Now, a big point to keep in mind about supply and demand in the market is that this assumes people enter the market in demand and are willing and able to pay in the market. So that's a big assumption. So supply is unable to shift out due to rent seeking, as we discussed. So we are assuming that the willingness and ability to pay on the demand side. So what about the social safety net? What about the obligations that we owe each other? You've seen this before from by David Bieto, from mutual aid to the welfare state. And he describes how prior to the welfare state buildup of the 1930s, that people were providing for each other, pooling their resources in a local and decentralized manner, helping people when they were down on their luck. So perhaps one solution, so right now the welfare state crowds out or replaces mutual aid and philanthropy. So that completes the supply and demand module on healthcare.